Right, Youngbuck is one of the greatest coaches the West has ever produced. He might even be one of the greatest coaches to ever coach in League of Legends. It's hard to say the latter as much because I actually get the sense a lot of the really good Asian coaches also have an unbelievable mind for the meta and a read on things, and they have actually innovated the game in a way that's very hard to say for anyone in the West, despite how many cool talk shows I've had. But I think as a Western coach, he is like a top 3 of all time for me. I think it's crazy how underrated this guy is. That's why I'm making this narrative mechanic episode about his time coaching Excel. The worst times, in theory, in his coaching career to show what an excellent coach he is. So obviously, let's go down the resume. He is a 6-time LEC champion, EULCS, same thing. 4 times as the head coach of G2, Perks, those guys. Everyone always goes, Zverev, well, Zverev weren't there for the first one, so that in itself even probably deserves a mention, right? Can anyone even out there even name the bot lane of the first championship of Youngbuck? I can, but if you can't, or maybe that suggests he was a pretty good coach, right? Then 2 times when he was the director of Fnatic, he won in season 8. I've heard again he was the head coach and Dylan Falco was the strategic coach, which doesn't mean take all the credit away from Dylan Falco, who's proven to be an excellent coach, I think, also in Schalke and G2. But I think you also have to understand he wasn't just the director in some senses. He's also, because he made one more final with Fnatic after that, he's a 7-time LEC finalist. By the way, no other coach has been in this kind of amount of finals. This is unbelievable work. He has been in the World's quarterfinals twice. He's been in the World semifinals once. And on the same occasion, he went to the final of the World's finals with Fnatic, obviously. It's obvious to me, and even back then, I think some people gave him credit, how good he is. But he had so many good players in G2 and in Fnatic. Now, not always, like I said, in that first split. But he had so many good players, right? I mean, even in Fnatic, by the way, I think he had flaws with Nemesis. And I think our Broxer work was really whack. And Reckless was having his sort of attitude issues. And Hillsang sometimes in it. And Whippo was tricky to work. But no, you'll just say, no, those are the best players in the LEC. Of course he should win. By the way, just having the best players doesn't mean you automatically win. Plenty of people come 2nd, 3rd, 4th with the best players in the league, with some of the best players in the league. Notice Fnatic didn't have as good players as the G2 super team there. By the way, in G2, sometimes there were other teams who had comparable strength of players like H2K and even the Fnatics of the world sometimes. But I would just say, look at some of those other players with other coaches. How are they doing with them? How many championships do they rack up with the others? Even the super team players of Perks, etc. Caps, they actually don't win as many with other coaches. Just saying, homie, because I get the vibe. Youngbuck's on some Phil Jackson shit, which I think is a reference he would love, by the way, because he's someone where he's working at more than just the X's and O's in the game, and it's actually the extra amounts he can bring out of other people that causes them to excel in a way that they don't when they're in other squads, even at their career peaks, winning MVPs elsewhere. So I think the one that really showed me, this guy is absolute mustard. This guy is worth his weight in gold as a head coach or as a director of your esports program for League of Legends. What showed it to me was season 9, the one where he never won a single championship. The one where he came 3rd with Fnatic in spring, 2nd in summer, and then he made quarters of Worlds. That's nothing compared to the rest of his career, right? He was racking up back-to-back championships when he was in G2 and then going to Fnatic later and getting championships over them and having amazing splits. He was going to the final of Worlds. He was in an MSI final in G2. I didn't even mention that earlier. This guy, I mean, you think, why am I mentioning season 9? I'm 3rd in spring, who cares? Because he just lost Caps, the best player in the region, and turned around 2 or 3 to 7 or something, and still made it overall to 3rd in the playoffs. That shows how mega this guy is. Then he takes the same roster into the summer, and they don't just come 2nd. They played 2 BO5s against the G2 team that most of us consider the greatest Western team of all time. One of the greatest teams to ever play League of Legends, a top 10 team of all time. And he almost beat them twice with his Fnatic team of flawed Broxer, of weird Nemesis, of Reckless and Hillsang with that weird odd couple relationship and Whippo trying to work into the mix there. His first proper season as the true top lane starter. And then he goes to Worlds, right? Just saying he made quarters in enough, guys, because he was in a group with T1. That's right, the team that's a champion in Korea. And then he was in a group also with RNG. Minus Lang X. That was, or Langshaw, whatever. That was the team the previous year that was going to be one of the greatest, it is one of the greatest teams of all time with Uzi I and Jiaohu. This time, obviously, it's with Karsa as the jungler was this period in time, and they had Ming still. This is an incredible lineup. These are some of the greatest players of all time. And he's getting out of the group ahead of them. This is wild, guys. I mean, how can people look past us and go, who cares, or whatever, like? And then who did they play in the quarters? Only the FPX team that went on to win the whole thing. So we don't even know how far they could have gone. This guy just gets more out of his players than anyone else seemingly should. And when you come to his time in Excel, you're all going to go, well, what did he get out of them? We'll have to look who the players are, won't we? And what the expectations should be and who he's competing against. And then what he even got out of that scenario. Because it's harder. It's easy to see that he must have been doing something right in these scenes. I mean, an idiot will say he won't. Just like they'll say, Grabs did nothing. Look at what Grabs did with the BDS players, my dude. That was a miracle in itself. The amount of games he had them in, the amount of times he had a lead. I think those are some of the bum-ass rosters to ever play in the LEC. And he was working miracles, even if he only won a few games. So similarly, Youngbuck is more the X's and O's guy in some of these cases. I think that if you look at Youngbuck, his ability to make band-aids and work and figure out people's personalities and what balance they should have, and then when to suggest a pick to them, and then when to gatekeep them onto a future, he's amazing at it. I've always said this, one day I would like to make a documentary just about that Season 9 Fnatic. I think it's incredible. I think it would really show you what a special coach he is. In the same way as football fans, soccer fans will appreciate this reference. In the same way as, in some ways, just like Faker's Season 7 run to the World's Finals is one of his masterpieces and shows how epic he is, no matter how good his team is. Obviously, Jose Mourinho, his incredible performance when he got Man United those cups and then second in the Premier League with a team that had no business doing that. That might be his greatest accomplishment over winning the championship. No, we're not saying greatest achievement, accomplishment, what he was able to do with what he had. So in a similar sense, I think what he did with Fnatic was incredible. But then let's look at the XL time period, a team that had far less funding, had very little as far as I know. It wasn't a draw for players. No one gives a fuck about playing in XL. They're not even a team that did a good job with like an academy squad, which is how the likes of... what do you call them? That's how Rogue did it. Mad Lions just managed to scout correctly from the ERLs. They lacked even big names. Their biggest names like Patrick, right? The joke is Patrick himself changed his name as he was coming up. He used to be called Sheriff, didn't he? And Patrick is probably one of those players who's actually underrated for his name value, but overrated sometimes by other people in the analysis game, in my opinion. So when you don't have the big names, you don't get the other big names to come. That's just the way they work. The players run a lot of who gets in at what team in the offseason. It's just full of poaching in the LEC. You idiots. That's why when everyone's going, Carlos is poaching, yeah, he's just better at it than all those guys. You think Sam Matthews is a fanatic out poaching? Get out my fucking face. The joke is, I've heard stories where they tried to poach a player from G2, but then Carlos would like outplay them, poach their player and keep his player. That's just called fucking checkmate, homie. Don't hate the player, hate the game. So let's go and look at the career of Youngbuck. So obviously, we all know, back here, look at this, we have the championships, don't we? They're the Outs, Hybrid and Emperor. Those are the players. Everyone also forgets Upset wasn't in that team. It was Kick his top lane. 3 different players in the split afterwards. Then you come to the championships then. Obviously, look, we all know they bombed out at Worlds and they did bad at MSI. We know that. Then early in 2017, they had that one where they lost to Flash Wolves, who kind of taught them something about the game. Then they got the other championships. So yeah, some of these were a little bit more touch and go. They're having to come through big series, but they got through them all. Yep, at Worlds, not bad performance. Well, first of all, they were in the MSI final, by the way, won a game off SKT. And then in Worlds, this was the one where they were in the group with Samsung and RNG. I think the 2 best teams at the tournament, even though, no, I would probably say they are the 2 best teams at the tournament. I think just go and look in the tournament. I think they were overall, even though RNG lost to SKT. Then you go to this year, and here we are. There's the Fnatic period, 3rd. You come in 2nd in playoffs. You go to Worlds. You play FPX. You even win a game off them. By the way, G2 didn't win a game off them. Let's never mention that, right? What is really young, but no, with worse team than G2, by the way. So then let's come to this time period of XL. Already you're going to go Thorin. You've lost the plot, mate. Look, he's coming 7th, 8th, 7th to 8th. Like, who cares? It's not a single playoff appearance. They're just garbage. Look, they're winning 7 games, 8 games, 7 games, 7 games. Like, mate, this guy, Youngbuck, he should be called fucking Kmart. You know, 7-Eleven. He's just open at all times. Like, bloody hell. He's available to give away a free win at any point in time, right? But then obviously after that, what do you know? It goes 9-9. They make the playoffs, losing 5 games to a super team. Then they go 9-9 and make the playoffs, losing 5 games to a super team. So something turns around in this year, though, season 12. But yeah, season 10, season 11, he's a trash coach. Doesn't know what he's doing. What a bum. But suddenly he got like half decent again. No, those are just how the results went. We'd have to actually look at them contextually, and we're going to. And that way you'll be able to know what happened in his career, right? So let's get into it. Season 10, spring, we'll start there. He's joined XL, hasn't he? I don't care about this Neo Surf Cup. I hope it goes out soon. So he joins Excel. Now, here's the key thing to say. Does anyone else remember this? Who was Excel when Youngbuck joined? Because remember, they were around before him, right? They don't mention that, did they? Woo! Don't tell you about that, did they? So when the LEC began, the first season was season 9, when it changed from the ULCS. And in that split, they had Expect, his old top laner. Youngbuck isn't here, remember. They had Cadril as jungler, cerebral guy, became one of the best analysts in League of Legends. They had Exile as the mid laner. By the way, he was actually a decent mid laner a few years earlier in UOL. They had Special as the other mid laner. Obviously, that story will come up to play again. They had Jeskla as the ADC. Has actually proven to be a pretty decent ERL ADC. Never really got like top talent in LEC though. And they had Kasing as a support, who 4 or 5 years earlier was very good. At this point in time was a bit washed. And they also had Mystiques because they were swapping in and out. And Mystique's also a good ERL support player, right? And they had Fern Dog. And they had Unlimited as their coaching staff. It's all right. It's an all right lineup. Some okay names. But they came 9th. They won 5 games. Then you go into summer. They go 4 games and come dead last, 10th place. They have Expect, they have Cadril, they have Special. They bring in Mickey. Ooh, interesting, Mickey. Remember that guy? Up and down in Korea, up and down in NA, came to Europe. They had Hjarnan now. Obviously, 4 or 5 years ago, Kasing's old mate used to be a really good ADC. Season 8 even was on Heimerdinger shit. Wasn't that good at ADC, for being real. It was all right. And then they had Jeskla still, because they were swapping in and out. They had Kasing and Mystiques again, because they just wouldn't learn the lesson and pick and shit, I'll get off the part. They wouldn't do that. And at this point in time, they had David Lim, who you might remember was from teams like Clutch and was Locals, like as assistant coach in Team Liquid. He was in Breaking Point, etc. It was a bit of a beater, but whatever. I'm sure he had some decent ideas about the game. So this team's nothing here. Look, here they're winning 9 games over an entire season. Now, you come to Youngbuck, he's already winning you 15 games over a season. Yeah, against different opponents, slightly different players. Not even that different, though, when we go and look at it. So let's jump into it. The first ever split for Youngbuck was this one, Season 10 Spring 2020. By the way, easy way to remember the seasons in League of Legends. The end of the... basically, there's one per year from 2011 onwards, right? So luckily, the year corresponds with the number... Unlike TI now, sadly. So in this particular one, he had Expect as his top laner. No surprise, you keep him. Actually, for where you're at, no, not that many other teams want him. And he was a competent player. He was never like a true carry threat for me, but he was a good weak sider. He was a Korean, so he had a pretty good work ethic. Seemed like he integrated pretty well. Could call what he needed to call. He was just a decent player. You had Cadril still. I understand why people kept gambling on him. This is one of the reasons I wasn't surprised he became a good figure. I used to bring him on talk shows, etc. He clearly was a smart guy. He clearly did have an understanding of the game and how to break it down. I think he just couldn't execute it in the game. Some people just don't have the hands or the skills for it when they're actually in the big moment. Then you had Mickey. Right, again, we're on Excel here, guys. Look at all these other squads that we have to gamble on someone. That's like a Korean guy who was high variance. He could have pop-off games. He wasn't fundamentally a good mid laner, but who are we getting at this point in time? And don't go whether this guy was available in the house. Half those guys were boss, and no one knew whether they'd come and be good or not. Everyone tells me every year K-Corp's got like 4 players that are really good LEC players. Let me know how many of them actually make it, mate. Some of them are some of the worst players to ever come in LEC. You had Patrick. Okay, that's cool. We got Patrick now. We brought him in finally. Obviously, he's not in H2K and all those teams anymore. Guy was certainly some potential, but you wouldn't want him to be the best player in your team, but he's going to have to be on this one. And then you've got Thorin, right? Obviously, that's Norscarin, who had like an instant, therefore changed his name. When he was in the previous year in Splice, there were times when he was a good player. Like, he's definitely not someone you just throw away immediately. Then you obviously, Youngbuck comes in, he starts coaching them. Let's just look at these other teams, by the way. First of all, look at this. He goes 7-11 and misses the playoffs, right? Oh, okay. By 2 wins. Okay. That's interesting. Who was on Rogue that split? Oh, right. It's basically the team that's going to start to become amazing from the next split onwards and win the most games. Interesting. He's 2 games below them. So not only that, he's 2 games below and he finishes on a 4-game losing streak. When you've got a bunch of nobody players, bum-ass players like that, and all the other teams are refining over the split, it's logical at the end you're going to lose the most. They're going to win the most because they're the Fanatics and the G2s of the world. You're going to fail. Look, G2 was on an 8-game winning streak. No wonder it's Rogue and Excel, the super experienced, are just not that good players that are losing to finish up the split and fail to make playoffs. Then let's just go down here. This is one of the things I always love, but everyone forgets this part of every fucking Gamepedia entry. That's why you all just talk about the end of the split like it was the way the whole split was. So what you ignore is this. He was top 6, which is a playoff spot. Look, 1, 2, 3. The first 3 weeks, the beginning of the split. Top 6, which where you need to be for those particular weeks, right? Then they're stuck at 7th every week until the end. So they weren't even a bad team. Guys, look how bad that roster is. Should we just go and look at that again? And then they lost the 4 games at the end, which just cost them the playoffs. Let's go look at the rosters, shall we? Let's see how good they all are. And we'll do this for every split. There's only 4, obviously. It's not a big deal. Right, so what we'll do is this. We'll look. Schalke, another bad team, by the way. Below Excel, let's go look at Schalke, shall we? Odoamne, one of the greatest top lanes to ever play in the West. Gilius, solid player. They had Lurox, this was the one with Forgiven where it all failed, didn't it? By the way, this was the team in the preseason. People were picking like 4th or 5th because they were winning a whole bunch of scrims. And Forgiven was looking good in solo queue. They had Gilius, veteran jungler. Lurox was a guy they just gambled on. It wasn't that good. Abedage still hadn't quite gotten together, but clearly had some potential. And again, for the sort of team Schalke's on, you think this should be a playoff team, by the way. Forgiven, who actually, look, Senna and fucking Aphelios came out. He never adapted to them. And then he was raging. And he was doing all right in the first couple of games. Then he couldn't handle it and he had a massive argument. He got kicked out. They got in Inax, who was never as good. And everyone who moved, lol, Inax is better, lol, keep Inax. They never would have been the miracle run if Inax stayed, you idiots. Then you had Dreams, who actually was a pretty half-decent player. He just was one of those guys who roamed a lot more, so he wasn't really a Forgiven type support. And you had Dylan Falco as your coach. By the way, he was coaching in the Fnatic team in Season 8 before Youngbuck became the official coach, when you all are going to be loving him, and now you're going to tell me he's great in G2? Why is his team getting 6 wins with these players, by the way? This is a really nice point. I'd way rather have Schalke's roster than Excel's, than I would have at the time. Then let's keep going, shall we, right? Fnatic, who finishes 2nd with 13 wins, they have his old lineup, but they get Selfmade instead of fucking Broxer. Selfmade could be a star. He's not like the one you want to carry your whole team, but if you have him and good players, you should be really good. And then they have the rest of his squad, and Mithy gets to take over, his old support player. And what do you know? They win loads of games. What a mega lineup of players that is, by the way. Then you come to G2, who wins the regular split with only 3 losses. They have the super team still. But they swapped around Caps and Perks. And by the way, the reason that worked, Caps only got together at the end of the split, is because Perks was fucking really good as a mid laner again. And hilarious what he did to Nemesis in the final. Mad Lions, who at this point in time, remember this is the online split, is starting to get really good already. And what do you know? Their lineup's all some of the best players from the RLs. They've still got a Rome, but they had Shadow, who was streaky. He was mainly a Lee Sin, but when he had the Lee Sin, he was fucking sick, wasn't he? Then you had Humanoid, who's obviously starting to become a really strong player, was already good in his first year. You have Kazi, who's all right. At this point in time, actually, but there was probably some of his best period of time. He was really strong at times. Obviously, Aphelios and stuff like that was changing the meta for everyone. This was an up and down time for ADCs. And then Kaiser, I think, already started to show some signs he was a really special player. So, okay, there you go. That's a pretty good team, right? And they're finishing 4th. By the way, look how stacked some of these fucking teams are, by the way. Misfits, you're going to think, well, that's no big deal. Misfits 5th, that shows Youngbuck suck. No, the Dan guy, by the way, was always half decent. I can see why they stuck with him still. Razork, obviously later, Razork goes on to become really good. He can even carry now in Fnatic, and it wasn't that long later. He was a monster like the year later in Misfits. Febiven, it's Febiven, bro. It's worse, he's going to be average in LEC. That's a way better player than we've got in XL. B-Voy, look, he's Korean ADC, like whatever. He seemed to have some mechanics. I didn't think he was that good. That was a bit of a mistake. Denick now is going to sound shit, but at the time actually seemed like a pretty good player and a good find, by the way. And yeah, I don't really know much of his coaching staff, minus amazing. But I would say even that roster is way better. I've got way better pieces overall in this roster at the time and since than I do in XL. Now let's go to Origin, who's 3rd here, tied with Fnatic. 13 wins. They have Alfari, probably the best top player there. They have Cersei, always underrated, usually borderline elite jungler. They have Nuked, who's still good at this starting time, really strong mid laner. They have Upset, one of the best, most consistent players ever in LEC, a real talent, and at this point in time, a star ADC. And they have the Destiny ones where they gambled on that player, didn't really work out that well. You had Gyoto and Case, and what do you know? Yeah, you're way better than this team is. Then you go Rogue. They're already starting to get together that lineup, like I said. SK Gaming finishes with 3 games less. This isn't a particularly good lineup, right? Nah, not really. You have Crown short, Tricks okay. Limit actually could be decent at times. This bot lane wasn't bad. Badly put together squad, though. You had Team Vitality, who, by the way, some of these players are really good. Kabashard and Sakan are those players that are carrying in the RLs. I think Kabashard's really good. Skeens just wasn't ready. Sakan wasn't ready. Way too early for these guys. Selfie, I don't even know why he's there. Maybe he played like a stand-in or something. Eternal, never made it properly guy. Comp, except for like season 4 or whatever. Comp at the time just wasn't ready, and this wasn't the right player to have with him. Fucking Jack Troll and Steelback actually could do some things, but they messed with this lineup way too much. It was a mess the whole time. They had some decent coaching staff. By the way, they win 2 games. By the way, which roster would you rather have had at the time? Vitalities, look at you already got Cabashard, by the way. Comp's clearly going to be decent. Sakan's worth a gamble. Or would you rather have XLs? Well, they win 2 and XL wins 7. Like, guys, you've got to look at the league when you talk about these things. So then let's go and look who they actually played against and won, shall we? It's another one no one looks at. So the Mad Lions team, who, remember, wins 11 games and ends up going on to, like, be a top team and beat G2, etc. Oh, they just 2-0 them. Yeah, they lose to the big playoff teams, of course. They're the playoff teams, but they're beating up some of the lesser teams. Schalke and Vitality's roster's way better, 2-0 on them. And then they're losing to the playoff teams, and then they beat Mad Lions twice, and they go 1-1 with SK, who had a decent bot lane. What more you want him to do? He's just a coach, not a miracle worker, guys. Like, you look at the competition, this is a stacked league. And by the way, not only was Misfits having the rookie of the split in Razork, but Febevan was 3rd all LEC mid. I hope it goes without saying that if you go down to here, there are 0 players from XL who get all LEC. So it's not the players are really good, but Youngbuck sucks. And by the way, if you're going to go, yeah, well, if Youngbuck was good, then the players would get the awards, then why doesn't he get the credit for all those all LECs and MVPs of the players in G2 and Fnatic? Exactly. People want to like just have their cake and eat it. It's mental. So yeah, in this particular split, what more do you want? Like I said, he has them in position. They just lose at the end when everyone's gotten to their best, mastered the meta, gotten everything ready, trying as hard as possible. Come on, man. He's doing quite a lot with this lineup. Then you go to the next split. Season 10 summer. Let's show the rosters again, shall we? So he's got now, Cries is his top laner, a guy who'd actually, I don't even think he was in like a good ERL or whatever, but just shown some like real potential, carry potential in the lower divisions. He's still got Cadril, because we're sticking with him. They bring in Special, because this was obviously the time period when, what was it was going on here? Mickey, you've abandoned the Mickey experiment. You had to eventually. So you bring in Special, a guy who I heard some people thought had some potential, decent. I didn't look that good to me in the LEC, but I wasn't watching him in the RLs, was I? You have Patrick and Tor still. Okay, we're sticking with this lineup. Let's see how they do. Okay, this time we won an extra game. We went 8-10, but we still missed the playoffs. Not by a game. They won as many games as a team in the playoffs. The problem was the tiebreaker that had been introduced meant that it's not, by the way, because remember, look, against Schalke, they're 1-1. So you think, how's this tiebreaker decided? Because they changed it so that what they did is the team with the better overall record in the second half of the split, the second round robin, they're the ones who qualify with the tiebreaker if you have the same number of games and you went 1-1 in the season split. So that meant Schalke, because of the miracle run, were the ones who actually went into the playoffs, not just by getting the same number of games, but by having the better record and obviously having the miracle run of games. Look, they won 7 games in a row to make the playoffs. XL lost the last 2. So then consider this. They started the split, lost to Rogue, lost to Mad, lost to Fnatic. By the way, those are some of the best teams in the league once we now know how good Rogue was. So they start 0-3. How did they ever get to 8 wins, guys? Think about that. Take 3 off that. That means they go 8-7 after the first week. They have a winning record after the first week. And we know they end on 2 losses. So that means at one point in time, take the 2 losses off. Can you do maths? That means they're 8-5 over a certain period from week 2 to the last week or something like that. 8-5 with this lineup of players. Cries, Cadril, Special, Patrick, Tor. Where are the superstar players, by the way? Where are the big names? Where are the players that like, oh, well, a player like that, you should be doing a lot better. Who? You know Cadril has to basically retire after this. You know Tor's almost never been heard from again. Cries that came and went and had a little bit of potential, that's about it. Special, you probably didn't even remember he played in the LEC. And Patrick's still Patrick, isn't he? And still isn't fucking upset, no matter how many times you try and tell me he is, my dudes. So then, let's go look at the results in this split. Yeah, they're 1-1 with the They're 1-1 with the Miracle Run Schalke. They lose to Fnatic, logical. They win a game against G2. Oh, we'll get to who the lineups were in a second. They lose twice to Mad Lions. They go 1-1 with Misfits. This is one where Misfits falls off. They go 1-1 with Origin. Origin comes last, but this is probably the most stacked split to ever take place. They go 0-2 against Rogue, who almost never lose to anyone in this split, 5 times only. They go 2-0 against SK Gaming, who actually makes the playoffs, and they go 2-0 against Vitality, who's the second to last team and wins 7 games. Look how stacked this split is. This is one of the craziest splits ever. So let's look at the rosters again. We saw Excel. Right now, Odoamne is still on Schalke. Lurox and Gilius is still there. Abadag is still there. Inaccurate. But they're getting Neon late on. So Nixlop was always half decent, especially around the ERLs level. They're getting Neon. By the way, he's gone on to just get better and better and better and better as each year goes on. And he helps them in some of these wins, didn't he? They managed to get all that miracle run going. Then you go over to Fnatic, team that's only finishing 4th with 9-9. Let's look at what roster they've got. Same roster as before. What are you talking about, guys? This is really strong. All of these players, I've never been a big fan of Nemesis. All of these players, maybe minus Nemesis, you might think with Nemesis. These are all LEC players. That's the sort of level of caliber we're talking about here. And they're winning 1 game more than my boy who has these players. Cries, Cadril, Special, Patrick Tor. What? Look at that fucking roster. And by the way, yeah, he doesn't beat them, but he's getting 1 game less as a win. What the fuck's going on? Then we go to G2. By the way, he won a game off them in the split. What's that? They swap Caps and Perks back. Caps goes monster. Perks has, sadly, a family tragedy, but plays himself back into shape. And by the way, G2 still wins the split and had won the previous split. They got 1-1 against them. This is another super team, guys. This is incredible. Then you go to Mad Lions. Same team as before. One of the best in the league. They finished second with 12 wins. Misfits, similar team. You could argue got better, right? They got in Kobe, much better ADC than B-Voy. They brought in Dos. I never thought that was the right move to bring him in over Denick, but Dos and Denick in theory, whatever. Dos wasn't that good. Denick was, in my opinion. I don't know why they swapped it out. This is a pretty hard team. I'd much rather have this by the team than XL, by the way. Origin has that still the same lineup. By the way, they came last with 6 wins. Look at that fucking lineup. Look at that lineup. They did bring Jack Troll at the end. He was shit, let's be real. How is that lineup finishing behind this lineup? And by the way, people said Alfari and Upset are the best at the time. That was a real sentiment behind the scenes by some people. Rogue, obviously, brings in what? Hans Sama, he's still there. Vander, he's still... It's the same people. Guys, look at how many... Then we go to SK Gaming. They've even done gamble changes. They've still got Crown Shot and Limit. But they brought in Trick. He used to be on... he was there before, maybe. They brought in Zaze as the mid laner, though. They swapped Genax top, which was a half-decent swap at the time. Look, that's not that good a roster. I will say that roster finishing above XL. Look, okay, maybe make a case there. But I do think overall there's still better pieces. Overall, man for man. And then Team Vitality... They try again with the different players. The Milicio one doesn't work out necessarily. They bring in Labrov, but as you've seen, Labrov's skills in solo queue don't translate as much. The Niji guy wasn't really that good. And Skeens, I see why they gambled and took him out again. There's still better pieces here, though, than on XL. And where's Vitality? 1 game less won. And they don't make the playoffs either. So it's like, you've got to look at the context of these guys. Then let's just go and look at the All-LEC, right? Because for the first time ever... He's got a player. This time he's got the All-LEC best ADC voted for by whoever the fuck votes here. I can't believe he's better than Upset and all of these guys are better than Upset. But okay, you can think that if you want, my dude. I'm going to keep doubling down on Upset for a long, long time. So he's got one really good player. If your only player who's All-LEC quality is the ADC, you're not going to be able to hard carry games and 1v9 games because he's the ADC. Even Neon needs Vetio, or Vetio or whatever. Like, even Upset needs something from the other players, like Wonder or Humanoid to have a half-decent game, or Razok to pop off. ADC isn't like mid lane. I don't think even top lane just hard carries as much as that, but at least it has a chance to if the mid lane is all right. In this particular lineup, like, I don't know what you want him to accomplish. Specials to mid laner, my dude. Cries as top laner. Who was ever singing the praise of these guys when they got into LEC? So yeah, you look at it. That's pretty good to finally have one player there. That's the only player, by the way. So Alfari, they finished last place, remember. You go down, Rogue has 4 of their players. Mad Lions, 4 of their players, including a Rome, you'll notice. 4 of their players in the All-LEC. Even Reckless is still around. G2's got 3. What is he supposed to do exactly? By the way, outstanding rookie of the split is Labrov over people like Cries, over these names. Labrov wins that. What's he supposed to do? What on earth is he supposed to do this split? Then let's go to Season 11, shall we? Now let's go to Season 11 Spring. In Season 11 Spring, the lineup is Cries, still around. He brings in Dan, who obviously had been in ERL teams. He'd been on teams like Fnatic, etc. Actually, in the ERLs, people thought he was a smart player who understood certain macro concepts. So actually, some people were interested in him. He just didn't get the call up to the bigger teams. He obviously briefly been a Fnatic, even being used over Broxer in certain scenarios. Checker comes in, a guy from the ERLs with some hype. You keep Patrick and Thorin, and now he's even got an Unlimited, Youngbuck's old teammate from Copenhagen Wolves, to be the strategic coach. So you go look down here. 7-11 record, similar to some of the past splits. They missed playoffs by one game. That's familiar. Just by like sort of one game. Then let's go down here, shall we? They were 4th in week... Let's see what this is. Week 1, week 3, and week 4. They were in 4th place. This is over the first half of the split, guys. Then they were 6th. They were 5th in week 2, but they were 6th in week 5, week 6. So this is basically 3/4 of the split. It's all going well. It's all doing fine. Because obviously, remember, this is a split where people are dominating. So there's a lot of people losing games here. And there's a lot of competition around this level. Then in week 7, they drop down. They don't win any games. Then they win 2 at the end, but they also lose another 1. And they finish 7th and 11th on week 8. And they don't make it into the playoffs. Now, let's go look at some of the results, shall we? So Astralis was pretty crap. Yeah, they 1-1 against them. Schalke was like a top 4 team this time around. This is the one, remember, where they had that great game against like G2 or whatever. So, or was it maybe I'm thinking of Rogue, one of the two. I think it was against G2. And then they go 1-1 against Schalke. They lose twice to Fnatic. We'll get to them in a minute. They go 1-1 against G2, who, by the way, wins the regular split. They go 0-2 against Mad Lions, still a top team. They go 1-1 against Misfits, team that finishes 1 more wins than them. 1-1 against Rogue, second best team in the league by wins. They go 1-1 against SK, who's a playoff team. And they go 1-1 against Vitality, who is the last place team in the league. Now, think about that for a second. So we've got Astralis, Schalke, G2, Misfits, Rogue, SK, and Vitality. So that's 7 different teams that Youngbuck's team beats. By the way, there's only 9 other teams in the LEC. He beats all of them except Fnatic, dodgier split for them, sure. And Mad Lions, still one of the top teams overall. And by the way, they go on to be the champions this split. With what players? Let's have a look, eh? Cries, Dan, Checkerlad, Patrick, Tora. Why are we pretending like these are amazing sets of players, by the way? They're players with some potential and maybe you can do something with them. But again, and also, what core are we working with here? Just Patrick and Thorin. Is that it? Patrick, Thorin, and Cries is not a core, by the way, to build around and win championships with. Like, what's going on here? So then let's look at the competition, shall we? So Astralis has White Knight, who was half decent, who was worth a gamble. Zanzara, who just got hyped because of interviews, was never that good. Nuke, this is when he was still struggling from the Origin period. He was having issues with his sleep. Magic Felix came in and actually carried a bunch of games. Obviously, he maybe didn't have the competitive metal to stick around. Jessica's back again, with this time with Promiscu. Promiscu actually not even that terrible at this point in time. In fact, hopefully it was better later. But yeah, whatever. There's some decent players here. Decent potential, at least. I actually think I'd maybe rather have this lineup than the XL lineup. I don't think that's that terrible overall. But then again, we're gambling on a lot of potential either way. You go to Schalke, the team that finishes 4th. They have Broken Blade, who's coming back from NA. By the way, one of the better and at least above average top laners in the league. Gilius gets to stick around because of the super run, because of the dream run or whatever the fuck. Abadage is getting better and better and better. And after this, gets to go to NA and win the LCS. Neon sticks around because he's just good, isn't he? And then Limit's there to be the support. Maybe not the best, necessarily the best year of his career, but these are good players. This is a way better roster on paper than XL's. You go to Fnatic, the team that, by the way, wins 2 games more than XL. They have Whippo and Selfmade still. Interesting players. Upsets in the team now with Hillasang. These are some of the best players in the league. And then Niski's coming in. Niski from NA. Like, guys, this lineup on paper destroys XLs. Now, I think one of these splits, it might have been this one. I made some like mad... Maybe it was the summer one where I thought actually XL might finish above them. But that was a gamble. That was a cheeky one. Let's go for G2, by the way. Obviously, at this point in time, they brought in Reckless to replace Perks and they have the rest of the super team. And Reckless wins the MVP. What a banging roster that is. Mad Lions, that wins 10 games. They bring in Armut and El Yoya to replace Shadow and Arome. And obviously, that's a much better lineup of players and went on to be really strong in the playoffs. Misfits, This is when they didn't have success with it, but they've brought in some of the players that are going to start to make them a really strong team. Here, eventually, is going to be a really strong mid laner for a split. Vetio becomes like an MVP caliber player and wins MVP. Razork starts to show later in the year he's pretty good and already has been around a while now. Kobe has just always been solid, and Vander's just a pro and always going to be at least decent at support, right? Then you look at Rogue, who does win 14 games. They've got Odo Abner now from Schalke. They've got in Trimby instead of Vander, who starts to show some mechanics, but this wasn't his best split. It's a really nice stacked set of players. SK Gaming, who does actually win one more game than XL. They keep Genax. They bring in Tinks. Everyone forgets this split. And obviously, Tinks actually was a player in the IRLs who did look like a player who could be a strong LEC player and was worth a gamble. They brought in Blue, who, from what I remember, was like carrying in the TCL. Didn't end up being very good in LEC. Jezu, for some reason, had hype, probably because he's French. I never thought he was very good. And Treats coming back from NA. He was also another victim of TSM. He was a way better player than should be on a team like SK, and I think actually should be on a better team now. Then Vitality, who finishes dead last. They have Segenda, who was a solid player in the IRLs, and definitely, if you go look at some of those EU Masters runs, deserves an LEC spot. Skeens gets another shot. Milicia gets another shot. Who knows about those moves, but I get it. They had talent in the IRLs. Comp you're sticking with, but then they swapped them out for Crown Shot eventually because something just wasn't working. Labrov's still here. He never gets blamed, I notice, for any of these results. Okay, interesting. This is a pretty stacked league, guys. Which lineups are actually better? Which lineups are worse than XL's lineup at the time or now? I challenge you, make a video if you think there was lineups that were worse. Maybe Astralis. Maybe SK. These two, maybe. Remember, I don't watch ERL, so if I'm hyping these players, I'm just meaning like potential or let's see what can happen. I'm not claiming like I've studied all their games. Then let's go and look overall what happens in the awards again. So in the awards, you have all of G2, because it's fan voted, sadly, wins all LEC. 4 of the Rogue guys win all second pro. Hillersan gets all second pro as well. Then 2 other Fnatic players get all pro down here, and 3 Mad Lions. Look what a fucking stacked league it is, guys. What a stacked league. By the way, remember, XL with Youngbuck and those players is going 1-1 against these players in G2. They're going 1-1 against these players in Rogue. Now let's go and look. Oh, that's right, there's no XL players. You know you need players to actually win in League of Legends, right? The coach can't play for you too. It's not StarCraft. He doesn't like mind control you all and do what he wants. Like, at the end of the day, in football, it is about scoring goals. In Counter-Strike, it is about getting frags. In League of Legends, it is about doing damage, about fighting, and about getting kills. Like, you can be as fancy as you want with every other aspect. If you don't have the basics of that, you can't win. So then let's go and look at one more split of this 4-split period, these 2 years when Youngbuck sucks and he proved it in XL. Let's go and see if he did indeed prove it, right? So in Season 11 Summer, 7th to 8th place, tied with Astralis. Doesn't make the playoffs. Top 6 is the playoff teams, right? Let's go and look who the players are. Kryze is still there. Just an okay player in LEC. Dan is still there. Probably shouldn't even be there at that point in time. They later on bring in Marcoon, obviously, and had VN. Denick is there for a while. I actually hope that would work out. I thought he was a good player in Misfits at a time. Patrick's still there. Obviously, maybe he's the Czech connection. That's why they tried that. Nukeduck comes back in as a mid laner. Everyone said bad move, shouldn't do it. Like you washed after stars. I told you don't give up on great players like Nukeduck. And what do you know? This was a split, by the way, where he had a bounce back. And people remember this is the split where bringing in Marcoon and Advien transforms the team. And Nukeduck's actually playing pretty well and carrying a bunch of games. Problem is, it's summer, isn't it? You're making all these roster moves. Other people are making moves too. But also some people are just keeping really good sets of teams, right? So let's see how it works out. They go 7-11. They don't make the playoffs by 1 game. Familiar story, right? Familiar sort of win record. Then you go and look how they were doing. They were 6th in week 1, which is a playoff spot. 6th in week, 4? Oh, 5th in week 4. 6th in week 7. And then after a 6-9 record, they win 1 game and they lose 2. So 1-2 on the last week. Notice how it's always the last week. It's always the hardest week. That just shows, it doesn't matter what you do with some of these players. If they're not good enough, they can't win, right? Now let's go and look who they performed against. 1-1 against Astralis. We'll get to that in a minute. Probably don't want to lose a game against Astralis, right? But then again, Astralis could inexplicably win games. It's one of the things about this lineup, and this coaching staff, in my opinion, at times. Then you go 2-0 Schalke. They had lost Abedagi, to be fair. 0-2 against Fnatic. Okay, that's a pretty ropey lineup. We'll get to the rosters. These ones aren't as crazy, this split. 1-1 against G2. again. This is still like the super team on paper, guys. And by the way, arguably a bigger super team than when they had Perks, if you think logically about the fact that Perks was swapping role, whereas Reckless wasn't. And then you go Mad Lions, champions of the previous split, 1-1 against them. 0-2 against Misfits, who, by the way, becomes really good again, thanks to Vethio and Hirit and Razork. Mainly Razork and Vethio. Then against XL, you lose 0-2, probably the best team in the league. Against SK, you lose 0-2, because bizarrely SK just always got wins off them. Makes me wonder what the coaching staff were doing that team. And then Vitality, you 2-0 them. By the way, Vitality is the sixth team and is a playoff team. They brought in the scenario, right? So let's just look at these other lineups a second. Astralis, they've kept that. Basically, they got the lineup at the end of the first split with. Okay, Nukeduck's gone. But here's the thing as well. If you're the guy who's coaching Nukeduck, wait a minute. So Youngbuck saw Nukeduck not very good in Astralis. I said, take me, actually. I'll take him as my player. Everyone criticised, no, keep Checker, lad. Keep Checker, lad. Because that's what people are like. They demand you take a player who isn't that good. And then when you fail, go, ha, you failed, you moron. And then you're like, but you told me to take that player, though. Then when you get rid of him, oh, you suck because you got rid of that guy. Where's Checkerlad been since, by the way? Has no one else figured out that he's some sort of god? This guy took Nukeduck out of the trash and said, this has still got value to it. This is treasure to me, not trash. Put him back in the team, and he was a really good player. This was actually like a bounce-back split for Nukeduck. Like, off the top of my head, let's look at who mid lanes are. Medji Felix, Nukeduck, Nuclearin, Niski, Caps, Leader, Blue, Larson, Vetio, Humanoid. Right, so if we say that the best mid laner is maybe Caps, and then we'll say maybe Larson, Caps, Humanoid's probably your top three. Oh no, sorry, Vetio's there, Vetio. So let's say the top four is like those players. Then you got Niski's pretty good. That's it, right? Like, let's be real. 5th and 6th best mid laners are probably Nukeduck and Niski, right? These are some of the best players on your team. What's going on? Then you look at the guys from Schalke. They've kept Broken Play. They brought in Kira, who's another monster in solo queue. Some Labrov character who never does it in the LEC, seemingly. They brought in Nuclear in to replace Abadagi and turned out to be a fairly shit, I think. What a ridiculous name as well for how he plays. Neon's pretty good. Obviously, later on, he gets to get in a better team, doesn't he? Limit is around still, but at this point in time, I think he was starting to struggle. Fnatic does do a crazy move. I actually thought this might be the one where Fnatic bombs completely, because Adam was a complete rookie. I'm amazed that he actually got so many good games off overall. I never thought he was going to be that good a player, and the eye test didn't check out. Bwipo, role swap to jungle. You'd expect that to fail. He didn't, so fair play to Bwipo. He turned out to be a much more cerebral player than maybe we even anticipated. Niski has a pretty good split overall. Upset and Hillsang are the best bot lane in the whole league, so now that I know that's going to happen, yeah, obviously I wouldn't pick XL to have any chance to be better than them. G2 has still got the super team. Mad Lions has got these guys here, still the same ones from before. Misfits has kept the same roster pretty much. Rogue, still a whole bunch of bangers, and Trimby actually gets better this split. Obviously, SK is always fucking around with their lineup, but fair play. And this one was stupid as fuck when they did the treats swap for Jezis, who comes in, who was the coach. Like, that one I hate, but whatever. And over here, in Vitality, if anything, they level up the team, right? Because they have Selfmade come in, and they have Leader. They get Selfmade from Fnatic, and they get Leader. And those two alone are able to get you here and almost beat the Fnatic that went to the final, by the way. It was a 3-2 series. So I think you look at these players. Again, most of these lineups are just better than the quality of players Excel's got. Because basically, Marcoon came in on the 8th game onwards, and so did Advien. Well, remember, you play 18 games, so there was 10 games left after that point in time. And you're in the summer split when other people like G2 just kept their roster the whole time and been working the whole year to be really good, right? So you go and look again. So I would say, by the way, overall, Misfits has leveled up as a team. You've got to look at the all LEC players. Oh, what do you know? There is 0 all LEC players. They don't even get to have the rookie of the split with Marcoon because Adam wins it because, of course, he's a Fnatic player and people have no eye test. But whatever, I guess he was pretty good in some ways. Marcoon didn't play all the games, so how about that? But you go and look. G2 players, Mad Lions players, Fnatic players, Rogue players. Like, this is where all the talent is in the league, boys. These are how good all the players are. So what are you supposed to do with these lineups? And by the way, let's just have a look after this time period. What did Youngbuck do, actually, eh? Then you go to Season 12 this season, and what do you know? He gets Finn, who's sort of a throwaway from Rogue years ago and haven't gone to NA and looked terrible, and he keeps the rest of the players, right? Marcoon and Advien. Oh, what do you know? The 5th This time they're in the playoffs. You give him good players. He actually gets in there. And by the way, he's finding some of these players. Markoon, Advien, Gablet, Odfin. These aren't massive names to bring in. You're in the playoffs. Then in the playoffs, you have to play in the low bracket, and you almost beat, I think you're up 2-1 at one point in time, the super team, right? The Vitality super team. These players that Perks put together to be a super team. Then you go to the summer split. 9-9. Not a losing record. Playoffs again. Ooh, okay. Better players. Same players, by the way, in Excel. But you get Mickey X, though, don't you? Ooh. They did have Mickey X come in at one point in Excel, though, which was obviously a key move. It is a big name, but not a lot of people were gambling and would pay that buyout for him, would they? Youngbuck again takes a player other people are casting aside. In the previous year, people are saying should be fired, and he shows that he can be a good player again and be used very well. You give Youngbuck good players, and he can do really good things with them, right? So you come to the summer split, and what do you know? You've got Mickey X now permanently. Markoon's still there. The rest of the lineup's there. Oh, look, yeah, you're able to go there. You go into the playoffs. You play the Fnatic Super Team, which, by the way, at the beginning of the year was predicted to win the split. I even thought they would win this split before this split began. They were in the upper bracket finals of the previous split. And in this one, they actually end up finishing in third place and going to Worlds. And they're a lineup that you're losing to in 5 games in a series. This guy is a miracle worker. This guy is incredible. What on earth are we talking about at this point in time? And by the way, do tons of his players make the all-LEC splits again? No, you know what? They don't. Like, if you go and look over here, season 12 spring, he has Patrick make third all-AC. But he's making playoffs now because he's got people like Mickey X as well as Nuke. He's been able to pick up, and Markoon suddenly looking really good, right? Then you come to season 12 summer. Who's in it now? Markoon gets the jungle spot. Patrick doesn't even get on there again. And yet again, you're in position to go further in the playoffs, and you're in the playoffs finally. So what I would say is this. If you look at the style of coach Youngbuck is, I do think XL wasn't the right destination, but other people wouldn't gamble on him. I tried to get TSM and some of the NA orgs to pick him up. They wouldn't do it because they have their own stupid ideas. Like, I do think if you have coaches like Dylan Falco, Grabs, these guys are probably better with the bad players and just coaching them on simple things. I think if you give Youngbuck talents, and as you've seen, he just sometimes needs reclaimed talents, he can find systems, he can emphasize that talent, he can make the proper flow structure of who should carry, he'll find solutions to little problems and interruptions, and he will get way more out of those players and those lineups than he probably should.
Hey guys, this is Perks, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel. I would like you guys to appreciate his YouTube channel, even though he talks sometimes so much bullshit that not even I can handle it. But most of the time it's pretty funny and entertaining.
This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Hades GOUD, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Jensen Goh, Kovacevicd, Ord, Pacy, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Tooorin, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask a question in one of those monthly AMAs where sometimes I roast people? Do you want teasers to find out who the guests are for upcoming shows and interviews I'm doing? Maybe you want to be part of one of those cool, lengthy esports discussions that I have. Well, if any of those perks sound tantalizing to you, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? Via the Patreon link in the description box below.